Hello, and we're back. Pioneer Deck Tech is again here, and we check on the recent tournament results from MTGO Preliminary, and the first deck that has come into the list in one of those tournaments is this one, which we call as a Temur Tempo deck. So what this list would differentiate from the typical EZ Drake's deck, or we can consider this one as an upgraded version because of the inclusion of the new card from Wilds of Eldraine, Questing Druid. So this card would basically have an adventure to Seek the Beast, wherein it's like an instant reckless impulse wherein you exile top 2 cards of the library, and then until the end of your next turn you may play those cards. And the bonus here is that if you're casting Questing Druid in its play, whenever you cast a spell that's one white, black, blue, or red, or that's the non-green colors, you can put a summon counter on Questing Druid, so it gets bigger and better for each of your spells cast. So since this deck evolved in a lot of these instants with some support of sorcery card rows, you can see that Questing Druid would basically grow big out of nowhere and just basically attack for a huge chunk of damage, while making sure that your opponents would not develop their board by making sure that you can destroy or deal damage to creatures, counter some of their spells, and often draw cards to have those every time triggers given to that of Questing Druid. So we're going to explore this list. And so aside from the Questing Druid, we have 11 creatures in total, including these 4 copies of Ledger Shredder and 3 copies of the Crackling Drake, 17 instants, that's quite a lot. 4 enchantments, of course, in the form of the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, in which you can do some shenanigans in the mid game. 9 sorceries and 19 lands in total. With we have sideboard here that we can discuss in a bit. So what do we expect the threat of not only having the new card Questing Druid is that we still have the usual Ledger Shredder. Whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you will connive. So for each of the extra cards drawn or discarded, or the non-land cards discarded, you get 2+1/+1 Ledger Shredder, and having a flyer threat to easily have you deal extra points or early damage, while also doing some shenanigans in the form of card draws and spot removals. So along with the Ledger Shredder, we have 3 copies of Crackling Drake. So this would be the usual win condition. The only inclusion is that it can hit hard and high damage, because the power would depend on the total number of instants and sorcery cards you own in exile and in your graveyard. So with that setup, you need, of course, some of these instants that you can curve out early on with a card draw. So we have a few, in which we have 4 Consider, 4 Free Impulse for the spot removal. Of course, Spell Mastery would easily be applied here because we have a lot of the instant sorcery cards. 2 copies of Op, 3 copies of Spell Pierce. This is the lone 1 mana cost counter spell, which is still very efficient in the metagame. 2 copies of Spike Field Hazard will also have to be play land effect if you can play it for Spikefield Cave instead. But this one, just need to have this one as a 1 mana deal damage to any target. Especially the good target here would be Thalia, Guardian of Traben, so that her taxing effect would not really matter to your matchup. And also we have 2 copies of Blitz of the Raptor. So this would deal damage to the creature Planeswalker equal to the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. So if that creature Planeswalker would die, it would be exiled instead. So that's a good addition in this deck. Now for the sorceries, we also have 4 copies of Sleight of Hand. This would also added to the 1 mana card draw effect of this deck. So looking at the top 2 cards in the library and putting one of them in your hand, in the other is in the bottom of your library. And also we have a single copy of the Strangle. So this need to have a 1 mana spot removal in the form of a sorcery setup. And of course 4 copies of Treasure Cruise. So the Delve focus would not be really affecting you, because your Crackling Drake would really also count those that was exiled. So exiling them for Delve would help, and instead you will get to bonus to draw 3 cards in this effect. So with this setup, last but not the least is our enchantments in the main deck. Of course, Fable of Mirror Breaker, creating this Goblin Shaman would really matter here as an added effect. Then you can discard your early or unnecessary cards early on, such as your extra lands if you have been drawing a lot of lands in your starting hand, and then having this one turn into a reflection of Gigi, wherein creating a token as a copy of another target, non-legendary creature, in which its best target is of course the Crackling Drake. since copying this one and having them haste because of this copy, the copy would also count the power depending on the number of exiled cards and the cards in your graveyard, that is instant or sorceries, and having them two creatures attacking the earth would basically game over for most of your opponent. Now for the land setup, we are just technically going with several mana fix. So we have 4 copies of Botanical Sanctum for blue and green, a copy of Breeding Pool, an island or source channel land with Tawara, several playset copy of Gerber Glide Pathway for blue and red. This can also be played as Lava Glide Pathway, 4 copies of Sparbreath Canal for black, for blue and red, and 4 copies of Steam Vents for Shockland for this deck. Now for the quick setup of your sideboard, since this oddly really elementary in most of the matchups, unless of course they would expect some certain new archetype to arise in the Pioneer format. So first off, we have 2 copies of Alpine Moon. So this is basically for the Lotus Field matchup, in which you can just name a non-basic land card name, in which they would be losing all of their land types and abilities, and they would also have only to produce 1 mana of any color. Then we have 2 copies of a Blade for any artifact shenanigans, and also can be used to deal 3 damage to a target creature. 2 copies of Eldergast. This would be really efficient against the red-green vehicles or any of the mono-green matchup, wherein you can just choose your target spell or permanent that is red or green and then put it on top or bottom of the library. Then we have 2 copies of the Sinful Stroke. This would go against the heavy mid-game or mid-range matchups, as it can counter those spells, or especially those relevant spells that are converted mana cost 4 or greater. Then we have 3 copies of Maze Might Tome. This would be an additional Cardo effect for the matchup against probably for the blue-white or Esper control matchups, in which you can just pay 2, tap page, put a page counter, and then draw a card. And then putting also a page counter would have you to scry 1. Then when there are 4 or more page counters, exile it and you will gain 4 life. And we also have 2 copies of Brotherhood's End that would be against aggro, especially humans, and can also deal with Anvil Rakdos Sacrifice decks, as it can destroy all artifacts with mana value 3 or less. And I think this is the last of the sideboards, 2 copies of Mystical Dispute, also for blue-white, for Esper, or for others matchups that has blue or blue-based in their deck. That can help this one as you resolve your relevant spell. This would only cost 1 blue mana to counter target blue spell. So for the mana curve, we have basically average of 2.34. That's very cheap for this one. We have quite a lot. That's 21 mana value, 10 for 2 mana value, and 3 mana value. That's 4. Color distribution is pretty much even. We have 27 for blue and 23 for red, and the color here is above of 19 blue producers, 14 red producers, and 5 for the green producers. And last but not the least are tokens. We have a copy token, Goblin Shaman from the Fable Dreambreaker, and treasure token, which can also be produced by the set Goblin Shaman that is produced as an effect of the Fable Dreambreaker. So I guess that's pretty much it for this deck. It was quite popular build that is encored in the EZ Phoenix kind of shell, but having Questing Druid in the main would really have you another way to edge out other matchups, and can also quickly win on its own by having to casting blue and red spells, making it bigger for each of those spells being cast. So I guess that's pretty much it for this deck tech Temur Tempo for the Pioneer format. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and we can have more of this discussion and also more of the Pioneer updates and other new deck techs in the format. And of course, we still have our standard series of matches and deck discussions in this channel. Again guys, thank you for checking out the video, and see you on the next one.